Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. This is Heather Mansfield of Nonprofit Talk for Good. Thank you so much for signing up for today's webinar. I'm going to go ahead and just pass it right on over to the experts. So, John, go ahead and get started.
Heather, thank you so much. We're super grateful to be here. My name is John Martin Vanderpool. I'm the co-founder of Social Impact Solutions. And Justin, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Justin, co-founder at Trellis.org.
And we are extremely excited to get to talk about two things that we love helping nonprofits do. We love helping nonprofits maximize donor acquisition and raise more for the organization, for your organization. And we want to talk about two ways that we want to do that. I'm going to be spending more time talking about storytelling. I know Justin's going to come in and talk about donor augmented fundraising. But before we get too far into this, we want to dive into a case study. And this was done by the Professional Firefighter Association in Canada and British Columbia. And this is the Bright Nights 50/50 raffle that they do. And they did some things that were very, very clever, very, very relevant to what we're talking about today. Is the first thing, they use a raffle, obviously very common in Canada, the nonprofits to do that. And the great thing with raffles is that it's great for getting a great uptick, a solid uptick in revenue. But the problem is that it really doesn't allow for you to create in-depth relationships with donors. And so it's something that they did for this Bright Nights 50/50, something I'm sure you can tell by the branding that they do around the holidays. They turned this into a very story-focused, so cause-forward type raffle that one allowed them to get great exposure for their cause, but then they also turned it into a donor acquisition or a lead channel for their nonprofit. And I'm going to tell you how they did that in just a second. And then finally, they did this through using technology, which is what Trellis is here to talk about, is their nonprofit tech that they have, to be able to raise more money from the raffle. So instead of this raffle being more of a lottery type system, well, hey, I'm going to put in some money, hopefully I'm going to make a lot of money out of this, they turned it into all of the great things that they're doing for supporting burn survivors for their firefighting association. They did it by leading with story. And then they allowed for their donors to have these upsell opportunities where they were able to get the contact information for their donors and obviously raise more money directly through the registration of the raffle, which was all made possible by using Trellis, which is awesome. And that allowed for a 20% increase in fundraiser profits, 30,000 additional donations. And this last one is the kicker, 1,000 new donors identified. So think about that. Just by using story, by leaning forward with the cause that they're trying to do and making it really, really easy for raffle users to become donors, they were able to identify 1,000 new donors that they were then able to nurture and turn into long-standing donors for the organization. So, which is just fantastic that they were able to go through all of that. Looks like my slides got a little bit off, so I apologize. We're going to back this up. So sorry about that. And this is what's so exciting when we look into those kinds of outputs for these organizations. When you're able to craft stories that inspire donors, and I want to talk about this a little bit differently, inspire your most valuable donors, nonprofits are able to pull different levers that they weren't able to pull before. Next thing that we really love to talk about is how nonprofits can really leverage these types of donation strategies to call their donors to action. And then finally, what I'm going to talk about before we pass everything off to Justin is we're going to talk about the secret ingredient to lasting donor relationships before Justin comes in and talks about how charities are raising more through strategic upselling, and then quick ideas that charities can implement to donor augment. So this is a really fun thing that they're doing at Trellis, is donation augmentation in their fundraising. And then finally, how to maximize fundraising by using technology. So Social Impact Solutions has been around for about 5.5 years. And what we typically see, nonprofits falling into one of two categories when it comes to why they're losing donors and losing revenue. It's because they're failing to communicate their story, number one. And then the other side of this, they're not nurturing donors properly. So when I say failing to tell their story properly, I think this storytelling gets used and abused a little too often, but it's also misunderstood, is that they're failing to really reveal the true value that they are creating with their donors' funds. Nonprofits are pulled in a million different directions, and when they're able to truly cultivate and tell stories that are saying, this is the transformation that we are creating with your money, it completely changes the conversation around what fundraising really is all about. And then we're going to talk more about what donor nurturing looks like, but I don't want things to get so high level. We're going to bring everything down to brass tacks and tactical And I want you guys taking lots of screenshots, I want you taking lots of notes so that you can leverage this starting today. So first thing, why storytelling? Storytelling is an effective hallmark, is the hallmark of effective nonprofits. One, for a couple of reasons. One, stories are really how human beings interpret the world. It's also how we capture the imagination of our donors, inspire them with our vision, and call them to action. That's why we really inference and really refer to storytelling as the effective measure for moving forward with nonprofits. And here's the way that we love helping organizations use storytelling to advance their cause. Again, I'm going to say this, they inspire their donors, right? They inspire their donors for what they're doing, the problems that they're solving, and how their donors can be a part of the solution. The next thing that they do is stories unite people around a common cause. Whether you're a solopreneur in the nonprofit space or whether you have an entire marketing and development team, I want you to imagine that you are in a giant canoe, and that when everyone on your team is speaking the same narrative, using the same messaging, telling the same stories, we are rowing in sync with one another. That allows us to do so much more than we ever could before. And the last thing that we really love about effective storytelling is that really galvanizes stakeholders to stay true to the cause. Like we just said a moment ago, running a nonprofit is extraordinarily challenging. There's so many different obstacles that you overcome, but when we constantly remind ourselves, our team members, our board members, our volunteers of the great work that is being done through effective storytelling, it really does inspire, unite, and galvanize teams to really go to the next level when it comes to true change that we're trying to create. So we've talked about the why, we've talked about inspiration, uniting people, and galvanizing. We're really going to talk about how to create an effective nonprofit story. And the first thing that we have to do is we have to understand our audience, right? There's so many different donor types that exist, whether this is Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, family foundations, government granting organizations, you name it. There are a myriad of different types of donors, and it's really important that we, number two, create clear and concise messaging for those different donor types. This next one might seem a little bit controversial, but it's going to make more sense. You need to demonstrate what your organization stands for, but what you stand against. I think this is really effective when you have a strong cause, like trying to end malnutrition, right? That is a huge, overarching, massive problem, right? You need to be specific for whom you are ending malnutrition, but we can get into that later. But you need to have all of your messaging aligned with you're trying to end this pervasive, chronic issue. And you need to be able to demonstrate that you believe that is wrong, unfair, and you are not going to stand for these types of atrocities that exist in the world. You are trying to end this thing. You stand against hunger. You stand against malnutrition, chronic wasting, all of the things that go in and around that important cause. Now, fourth, and I think this is one of my favorite things that the most effective nonprofit marketers, fundraisers, leaders all across the board is they get to cast a vision of the future that your organization is aiming to create. You get to cast that vision using your stories. And this is the time where this is so important. There's so much divide, so much tribal thinking. When we get to cast a vision for what the future is going to look like via our nonprofits, we can do some really incredible work and really bring people together for very worthy causes. And then finally, and we're going to go into this more in depth, every nonprofit story must call donors to action. It must call donors to action. We're going to get into more of the tactical side of what that looks like. So let's get a little bit more granular here on identifying the key elements of a compelling story. One, every good nonprofit story has a problem, right? If you do not have a clear problem, and notice I'm not using the plural form of that, I know that you overcome many problems, that you help your stakeholders and your constituents overcome many problems. But when it comes to clear storytelling, there is a singular problem. I'm sure there are going to be questions about that later on, and I'll be happy to go in depth on that. When you have a clear problem that you are solving, you are so much easier to understand because we're trying to eliminate one thing. We're trying to eliminate confusion. So a clear problem is one of the most important things. And really, if we want to get even further, the piece of the problem that you're trying to solve is what's so important for your nonprofits. The next thing is that you have to have a clear plan. This is where your nonprofit comes in and says, this is the problem that exists, and this is what we are doing about it. I don't know what's going on with my screen, I apologize. this is what we are going to do about the problem when it comes to this issue. So this is how your nonprofit gives your donors a very easy 1, 2, 3 step process on how you are helping them being your constituents, overcome the problem. And then finally, we need to have a solution, right? This is where we're really starting to talk about impact. We're talking about the outcomes that you're going to create for the people or the cause that you serve. This is that vision that you are casting for the future, but this is the data that backs it up that says we are a legit organization that are creating real outcomes for real people or for a real cause. So a problem, plan, solution. And you need to put your critical hat on and go to your website, go to all your marketing collateral and ask yourself, are we communicating the problem? Are we communicating the plan? Are we communicating the solution in all of our marketing? Because without these 3 things, you do not have a story, period, but you absolutely do not have a compelling story. If you want some examples, these are 3 very well-known organizations that do this exceptionally well. You've got UNICEF, Charity Water, which honestly, Charity Water rewrote the book when it comes to sort of best-in-class nonprofit fundraising, and obviously World Housing being another fabulous organization doing great work, but telling very compelling stories along the way. Now, unfortunately, we can't just tell a story one time and expect people to give us millions of dollars. We have to do something else. We have to nurture these relationships. So we must nurture our donors. And I want to go ahead and tell you why it's important to do that, because we're trying to establish trust. Without trust, donors will not give. That's just what it boils down to. Donors give to organizations that they trust, and that they trust them to do wonderful, wonderful things with the money they are giving them. And that's why it's so important to be extremely clear with the problems that we're solving, how you're solving them, and the outcomes of your interventions with your programs. And so again, not trying to be too generalizing over here, but most of our clients typically fall into one of these categories. Is number one, they don't nurture their donors, like they don't contact them. They don't do phone outreaches or email or any kind of nurturing on a consistent basis. And the other thing, if they do contact, all they do is ask for money. That's not a great way to establish trust. I never talk to you, but when I do, I need money, right? We don't want to fall into that category. And so you want to really be more thinking about, how am I going to hasten the speed of relationship with our donor base? And really, I want to give you just quick steps that you can implement today on how to do exactly that. One is that you need to be able to personalize and segment your donor base. And the way that we really love doing that is by creating ideal donor profiles, right? We're trying to help you raise money. In order to do that, you need to have an ideal donor profile so that you can speak to your audience more succinctly and resonate with them more strongly. You really can't do that unless you are personalizing and segmenting your donor base. So again, just using the example from before, if I'm trying to raise $15 a month from Gen Z college kids, it's gonna be a very different type of conversation than if I'm going to large family foundations trying to ask for hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars worth of grant money. Very different conversation, very different donor profiles. Both are great. It's just a matter of which one is your ideal donor and creating that profile for them. The next thing that we need to do is you need to create consistent and relevant communication. Obviously, this is a Nonprofit Tech for Good webinar, so I hope you guys are reading Heather's resources and the resources that her team is putting together. Recently, they just came out with I think this was in Q1, Heather, so forgive me if I'm off on my dates here. You came out with a report saying that only 15% of nonprofits that were surveyed communicate consistently with their donor base. And consistently, it's like once a week, right? So I mean, that's what we're talking about here. And so we've got to massively increase the amount of organizations that are communicating consistently. Please, in the name of all good things, if you walk away with anything from this conversation, be consistent with your donor communication and nurturing, because we're trying to create a relationship here, and we're trying to do that online. So it's not easy to do that when we're just talking about emails, phone calls, things of that nature. Next thing that we need to really consider is engaging donors through multiple channels. In that same report, it really affirmed the world that Social Impact Solutions lives in, where we help organizations raise more money online, is that email is the most valuable channel. And I don't want to get too lost in the marketing weeds here, but I do want you to walk away understanding this, that email really is the only channel that you as a nonprofit own. So O-W-N, I'm saying that you own. Think of every other channel like LinkedIn or Twitter and Facebook as something that you're renting, right? You are renting space on LinkedIn, saying, hey, if I play around on this platform and post lots of content, maybe it will work with the LinkedIn algorithm and I'll get more exposure, right? You're sort of gambling when you do that, but that's how it works, right? LinkedIn is making all the money from, your audience's attention. You're just trying to get a slice of that pie. With email, you own that relationship because you have their emails and you're able to send messages to them whenever you want to. And so email is still the most valuable channel when it comes to fundraising. And it's because you own the relationship and you have created that relationship so much so, you've created so much trust, so much so that they wanted to give you their email address. They want to learn more. They want to hear from you. That's why email is so important. It's not going anywhere. It's been around for a long time and it's still the most effective way to raise money online. The next thing that you really need to do is you need to determine your most reliable growth channels. And by growth channels, I mean, where do new donors come from? When we talk about the case study with the Firefighting Foundation, they were using a raffle as a way to get new email addresses, new donors into their database, right? That's how they were able to get 1,000 new donors with one event. It's fabulous, right? It's a great strategy. You need to know what your most reliable growth channel is so that we can talk about how to double down on that and get more return on that, on those efforts that you're putting into it. And then finally, this is how we can really be clear know that we're nurturing donors effectively. Follow the Pareto principle with this, the 80-20 rule. 80% of your emails need to be about telling stories of transformation, success stories, how your nonprofit is making a positive difference, but most importantly, how your donors are making a positive difference. That's a huge nuance there that is not understood well enough. How they are making a big impact through your organization. And the other 20% really need to be around the problem that you're solving and calling your donors to action. So think about that. 80-20, just walk away understanding that 80% nurture, 20% problem, and calling people to action. That is how you nurture a relationship. So just imagine, I've been married gratefully for over 7 years now. I dated my wife for 4 years while we were in undergrad. There was lots of nurturing. There was one call to action, like one let's get married moment. Gratefully, it worked out. But there were lots of, hey, let's go on another date. Hey, I just wanted to see how you're doing. Hey, can you meet up tonight, for dinner? Lots of nurturing, one call to action. Obviously, the percentages are a little bit different, but just work with me there. 80% is about the donor and the great work that they're doing. 20% is about the problem that you're solving with your donor and calling them to action to make a bigger impact in the world. So just remember that principle. It's super effective. So speaking of calls to action, there are two major kinds of calls to action. You have direct calls to action and transitional calls to action. Direct calls to action, that is the give today, right? That is whatever your direct call to action is, your buy now button, obviously your give now button in the nonprofit space, you've got to have it. And you would be amazed how many nonprofit websites, how many nonprofit emails, how many nonprofit marketing collateral that we see, there's no call to action. I mean, even in these nurture emails, there's no call to action. It's just information. And so we've got to be really, really good at making it extremely easy for donors to give us money. That's one thing that we've got to be great at. Always make it easy for donors to give you money. And that's where we can talk more about technology. Trellis has some great solutions for this, but from a marketing standpoint, put your give now button. You're almost going to be uncomfortable how many times it's on your landing page. It needs to be that way. You need to be really good at positioning yourself as a great solution for a problem to be solved and your donor to be the ideal person to do that. There's a lot more we could talk about there, but be sure that you're making it really easy for people to give you money. Now, the transitional call to action goes along with what I was saying regarding email. Your transitional call to action is how you get new email addresses. This is for your donors who maybe they like you, maybe they love you, but they're not quite ready, to give you any money. They need to learn more. That means you need to have some kind of digital asset, whether that's a PDF, whether that's a video series, your impact report, your annual report, a quiz, whatever it may be. Something that says, okay, I like what you're doing over here. I need more information. Give them more information at the cost of their email address, right? They already say they want to learn more. This is the analogy. Our girlfriend was okay to go on another date until she became my wife. There were a lot of dates that took place in order for that to happen, so for 4 years. So just think about it. The purpose of the transitional call to action is to acquire your donors' email addresses so you can nurture them further. Everything goes back to I'm nurturing this relationship. And if there is any secret in effective nonprofit marketing, it is growing your email list. Growing your list is the secret to growing your nonprofit. And we'll go into more detail on that in just a moment. So again, the secret ingredient of lasting donor relationships, consistency. I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here, but I promise you this is the path forward. The most effective nonprofit fundraising professionals are consistent. We just talked about that stat. 85% of nonprofits are not consistent with their nurturing and their communication. Only 15% are. 85% are not. You are likely in that 85% category. If you're disappointed with how much money you're raising online, we need to start here. We need to start by being a lot more consistent with our nurturing so that we can raise more money online. All that really means is we haven't established enough trust. I know that might be disheartening because you have a million other responsibilities, but if you put yourself in your donor's position, in your donor's shoes, you might be able to say, you know what, I get it. They don't know enough information about what we do in order to justify giving $1,000, $10,000, $100,000 to our organization. So let's start by being extremely consistent. And so I want to go into a little bit more of the, the marketing math behind this, because this is why donor relationships matter so much and over the long term. Is there's a metric, and it's the most effective metric if you're going to determine how your nonprofit is going to grow financially. There's other ways to talk about the impact that you're working on, but this is a fundraising conversation. It's your donor lifetime value metric, right? This is how much money does our average donor give us and for how many years. So let's pretend that your nonprofit raises on average $500 per donor over the course of 5 years. It means your donor lifetime value metric is $2,500. It's fine. That's your metric. But the only two things that you can do to grow your nonprofit from a financial standpoint is, number one, get more donors. You can say, okay, cool. So $2,500 per donor. Let's go get 10,000 new donors. It's a lot of money. Or number two, raise more money from your donors. You're going to end up doing both, but those are the only two levers that you can pull. And so effective storytelling and nurturing, that is how, one, you attract new donors, convert them to be, all about your cause, to become rabid fans of what your organization is doing. But then we need to raise more money from our donors over time. We need to keep them longer. So we don't want to churn. We want to keep our donors longer, and we want to raise more money from them at the same time. The longer you can keep your donors and increase their lifetime value, the easier it will be for you to grow your organization. This is true in the business world, and it's absolutely true in the nonprofit space. Those are the only levers you got. Can I get more of these donors, and can I raise more from the donors that I have? And there's a process that we take nonprofits through to do exactly that. And I want you to just be aware of that. And one of the quickest things that you can do to know how well you're doing, and Justin's going to talk about this more at the end, go to fundraisingquiz.org. It's a 2-minute quiz, so you can learn what your organization is doing well and what you can improve. And there's also a lot of free resources in there that you don't have to pay for anything. You just get in, get out, take the quiz, and get to leverage those free resources for you as you go. It's just fundraisingquiz.org. And the other fun thing, and I'm going to just pitch everything over to Justin on this, is he has a technology platform, Trellis, that they've built to help you raise more money from your donors using technology. You're not even having to go, hire development officers to do this. You just leverage their tech to raise more money right out the gate. So super exciting, and I'm very excited to transition everything over to Justin on this. And I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter right now, my friend.
Great. Thanks, John Mark. I am excited to get to this, and I love all the strategies, and please stay tuned because I'm going to try and show you how we can implement those strategies using technology, as this is nonprofit tech for good. So John Mark, first of all, you said, it's even harder to get people's attention online. That's why I wore this shirt today. So we're here, we're having a great time. I just really wanted to make sure that people could pay attention, and you got to use every little tactic and strategy you can. And if it's just putting on a different shirt, that's easy. So that's kind of what you can think about with what I'm going to talk about. Is I don't want to do anything that's complicated. It's just, what are you doing now? How can we just add a little tweak so then you can start, as John Mark said, storytelling a little better, and then increasing that donor retention through nurturing and identifying which donors you really want to attract. So when you think about that case study, there was 10,000 purchasers of this raffle, 10,000. How are you going to message out 10,000 people? You just can't. So how do we bring it down to that 1,000 that added that extra donation, and then you can spend your time on those. And that's really what I want to talk about is how we can raise you a little bit more money right off the hop. We can then identify this group of people, and then we can show you how to get them into that lifelong donor or long-term donor. And that's a lot of the strategies that John Mark talked about. So let's get to it, I guess, eh? So step one here is get to the next slide. Yeah, so what is a strategic donation upsell? I mean, everyone's doing it. It's nothing new. I mean, you've all been asked to upsize. Do you want fries with that? It's a standard thing that happens in every other industry. And you know, you think about the airline, especially the premium seat upgrade. Whenever you're buying a ticket or selecting your seat, they ask you. They say, you know, do you want to upgrade your seat for $39? Or now there's like special ones for the exit rows, and it's getting a little crazy. But what it does is it makes the airline a little bit more money, but then it also gives them some data, gives them some insight saying, oh, this person, John Mark, he wants to fly, you know, premium economy, and this other person wants to fly premium. And now they know that, and they can tailor their messaging towards that because they know they're going to make a little bit more money off John Mark, for example. So that is what a strategic donation upsell is, and that's the point of it, is to help you segment your donor relationships very easily so you know where to spend your time and where you can, you know, build that ideal donor profile that John Mark was talking about. The definition is asking for donations from guests at the correct moments to encourage giving. And think about it too, these are unrestricted funds as well. We know we all love unrestricted funds. So these are all unrestricted. It's just a simple donation on top. And why does it matter? I think that's also key. Why should you keep listening to me, right? I know I'm competing with everything else on your screen, and I hope I win. And I want you to keep listening because it will immediately raise you more. And I'll talk about how much more by just a click of a button. Not only that, it'll identify superstar donors. So as I mentioned, it'll identify those people that really that care about your cause, that have the money to give more, whether that's, you know, they would have done 100 and now they've done 120, right? You can identify how to get a little bit more. And then we can talk about how it identifies to convert them from one-time donors into the long-term. And that's why it really matters, is that long-term donor, that lifetime donor value that John Mark ended on. So here's a little study we did. We looked at 1,000 fundraisers, and we said, okay, fundraisers that add a donation and fundraisers that didn't. And you can see that the orange bars here, all of them are higher than if you don't ask for a donation, which are the blue bars. Ticketing, you didn't see that much of an uptick. But then when you had auctions as well, you saw more because people that are bidding on items, they care a little bit more. So you can ask them for a donation as well. They're a little bit more involved. If they're buying items for sale, whether that is, you know, a mulligan at a golf tournament, or if that's a hat with your logo on it, again, they care more. They're willing to donate a lot more. And then raffles as well. Raffles is one where the donations really do increase your fundraiser totals, and that's because the people that do raffles that tell a story bring out more. They bring out more donors, they bring out more purchasers. They say, oh, well, you know, I have a chance to win and I can also help this great cause, because they're telling that story, and that's that storytelling piece. And on average, with these 1,000 fundraisers, they raise 20% more. So I'm going to tell you how easy it is to do this, but just raise 20% more. That should be a good enough reason to do these strategic donation upsells. And you might be nervous saying, oh, I don't want to ask my donors that when they're buying a ticket, but it's okay. They don't mind. We haven't had any feedback that is negative. They can easily skip, they can easily pass over. The positives that you get from it though are huge in terms of that data and the revenue increase, right? And they're just seeing your cause more. Even if they skip, they're still reminded that, oh, I could give $25 to, you know, help STEM education within your program, or whatever that is that you're promoting. And it just helps them subconsciously really realize, well, they're checking out, oh yeah, I'm helping a good cause, even if they skip. So let's think about that process. Someone donates with a ticket purchase. What happens after that? Well, I think you should reach out and thank everyone. However, there's going to be that 10% of people that added that donation, maybe adding a little personal note to that, saying, you know, John Mark, thank you so much for for donating on top of your ticket purchase. That just went above and beyond. I really appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing you at the event. Then it's that transitional calls to action. You really don't want to then start asking John Mark for more money. He's like, I just gave you an additional. So that's where it's you donated to that STEM piece. So maybe telling them a little impact story about that, or how a donor came in and volunteered their time, something like that. So that does is it builds and nurtures that donor. And then after that, you can start asking them to be a recurring donor, maybe something like that. There can be an ask at the end, but you might be thinking, wow, I don't have time to do that. And what I'm trying to tell you is I'm not expecting you to do it with every single person that goes to your fundraiser. I'm expecting you to do it with that little slice that said, hey, I care about you. I gave you a little bit more. That's what I'm hoping you can take from this. And please make sure, we love seeing all the questions come in. If you have questions, please keep adding them in. It's really great to see. So this is what it looks like. This is a donation card ask. As you can see, there's image, right? Storytelling. Images are key in storytelling. If you can't see it, you can't believe it. And then clear numbers, right? So there's an image with a clear number, really easy. The title is what you need. 75 meals, $25. 75 meals, $25. Really easy to get to know that and see that. And then after that, we have the other additional add-on right here. So in the checkout flow, right? It doesn't have to be a $5,000 ask. It can be a $5 ask or a $10 ask, for example. But you can see on the screen here the additional donation part. So what we have here is it's just that easier way, and you just turn it on, right? So you can just turn that on, and you're not adding any complexity to your fundraiser or anything like that. So how do you do that? Well, audit your fundraisers. So think about how many fundraisers you do during the year. Maybe it's one flagship event. Maybe it's a golf tournament as well. Maybe you just have a donation campaign to ask at holidays, whatever that is. Think about how you're asking them and what you're asking them to do. And then think about a way that you can maybe add a little supplementary ask to that to split up the donors. What could you do? Is it just an upsell on donations, or maybe you can look at donating the bid if you lose. So if you're doing an auction, maybe you can say, hey, thanks for bidding. Unfortunately, you didn't win. Did you want to donate your bid? Or maybe just donate a part of your bid, right? So $50 of your bid or $10 of your bid. People have told you that they will give you $100 for that item. Of course, they wanted the item, but they're also doing it because they care. They're telling you they care. And then it's crazy when you think about, 90% of bidders don't win and they never spend that money. But they have said they have that money and they like your cause. So asking them at that point is fine. You're not over asking because they're already telling you, I have this money in my wallet and I want to do that. You just need to ask them at the right time. So think about where you can do this and then identify those people, those superstar donors. And as I mentioned, it is making it easy, right? So it's a quick little pop-up, right? They're already going through the checkout flow. Do you want to add a donation? And it's not I have to type in an amount into a text box and I don't really know what it's doing. It's a full screen. So it's a full screen with pictures telling that story, saying, hey, do you want to do this? If not, no worries, here's the skip. But it's a click of a button. It's not typing a text box for an additional donation or emailing them afterwards to see if they want to donate their bid, because then they have to do all this extra work. Here's just a great example of using pictures and text in a different way, just to show you there. You can clearly see this is a Big Brothers Big Sisters. So if you care about the matches, or you care about the family or building skills, you can donate to the different sections depending on what you care about. And you do want to engage your donors all in one place. And what I mean by that is when you do set up a fundraiser, no matter what technology you use, it needs to be driving them to one place. You don't want them to go bid in one area and donate in another area, etc. So what that looks like too is bundles. I do really want to stress bundles and packages here. It is a great point because as the 80-20 rule, you know, the parity of choice, making it simple, all of those different concepts are really captured in the bundle. It's what do most people want? Give them that really easily. So whether that's you know, you're at a golf tournament, you want them to buy the green fee, but you know, maybe a mulligan as well, maybe a putting contest, maybe a raffle ticket, maybe you can even sneak in a $25 donation with a tax receipt as well. So what can you do? And then it's just one choice. Well, yeah, I'm going to go for the ultimate bundle, or I'm going to go for the superstar, whatever you want to name that. And then they only have one or two choices to make, and they get all these things with it, and it looks really attractive to them. I would highly recommend making it really easy as well. So you can make all these additional pieces actually look like one thing for your donors. So it's really streamlined and straightforward. So these are just some examples that you can use in your fundraisers right now. So again, audit your fundraisers, think about that donor experience, and think about how you can make it simple for them so that you can raise more money right away. You can also identify those donors that you want to spend time on, and then you can turn those donors into lifelong or long-term donors. I like to say lifelong because that's the goal we're going for, but those long-term donors. And lastly, if you are using a CRM, make sure that the people that do those certain purchases, if they purchase a bundle, star them. If they donate their bids, star them. If they do a donation, additional donation at checkout, star them. So then you know, right? We have some integrations into many CRMs as well to help you do that all seamlessly. This is an example of a Razor's Edge one for Blackbaud. But there's lots of different ways that you can do that into your CRM. So think about that part, because then you can do all of the tactics and the strategies that John Mark was talking about with the emailing and things like that. Because at Trellis, we realize that a fundraiser is only as good as what you do after. So we really want to make sure that we're helping you get the core value and get those really great donor relationships, because that's really what matters. It doesn't matter that we can sell tickets online if you can't build those donor relationships. Donor relationships are the core, and that's why we are trying to build all of these things to lead to that goal. And just some more examples. So where do we go from here? John Mark talked a lot about storytelling and donor retention, and I'll let him review that. But where do we go? It's, you know, reviewing your website, the storytelling at the forefront, auditing your fundraisers so you can encourage those donation upsells, and then of course taking the quiz. So John Mark, I don't know if you wanted to review a little bit of what you talked about and review the quiz, and then we can get to some questions.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got some good questions coming in. Please keep them coming in, because we're about to dive into Q&A. And so this quiz is designed to just help you identify things that you're doing exceptionally well from a impact measurement, from a marketing, from a fundraising and communication standpoint. It's like, great, we're doing this well. Maybe we need to shine a little bit more light in this ongoing email nurture, which is one of the questions that we got in, is that we send out a monthly newsletter. How much more often should we be emailing? And like I said earlier in that Nonprofit Tech for Good report, you need to be aiming for once a week, not once a month. And so that's just a great benchmark to really try and measure up against. And I want to see who that was from. That was from Anna Swearingen on that. So just be thinking on a weekly basis on that front. So this quiz is just an opportunity for you just to gauge, hey, this is what some best-in-class nonprofits are doing, and here's what we can do very quickly in order to attain the kinds of outcomes that we're looking for. And so as a quick review, we've got to tell the stories. We've got to really communicate the value that our nonprofits are creating on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. That's what we so often see, is that nonprofits are underselling their value. There's so much good that you're creating, but you're pulled in so many different directions. You're under-resourced, you're understaffed, so many things, so many obstacles that you're trying to overcome, that we're leaving a lot of value on the table. And donors, you know, they don't run nonprofits, so they don't get it. You know, they don't work in the field the same way that you do. And so there's a gap, right? And what we're trying to do is really address that gap, really make those connections and create stories that resonate with our donors. And there's a myriad of ways that you can do that. email is the #1 channel that you can really go down from a ongoing relationship. How do I nurture these donors and make a big difference in fundraising over time? And then using tech like Justin's built with Trellis is a fabulous, fabulous, fabulous way to do that, specifically with events. But then, like you said, all the magic happens after the event. Yeah, how exciting is it to think about a firefighting organization? And they got 1,000 new donors, right? 10,000 contacts, 1,000 of them gave, so 10% converted on checkout. Remarkable number, seeing that. And then the opportunity to have ongoing donations from those donors is just through the roof. And so I think that's a great review in telling the right story, how to nurture donors appropriately, how to call people to action, how to cast a vision for success. But I think one thing that we don't really have too much time to go into is just how to position your nonprofit as the guide to your donors. Your donors want to make a difference. They just don't know how. You are the vehicle in which they can give money to create a tremendous impact. We could talk about that ad nauseum later on, but that really is one of the keys. Don't talk about yourself. Talk about the good that you're doing with your donors. People don't unsubscribe when they're being told all the good things that they are doing, right? No one unsubscribes from that email. People unsubscribe from, from nonprofits that are just beating their chest that they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. Tell donors the good work that they are doing through your organization.
Nice. I love that. Let's leave it right there and get to some questions. I see a couple that I can tackle first, if you don't mind, John Mark, and then
Go for it.
yeah, so I saw, what kind of events do you run to be able to do these upsells? We do street fairs, Giving Tuesday, party nights. Street fairs is great. I assume sometimes street fairs too are free. So how do you get the people, again, ask them for a little bit of money up front? So a street fair, you want to get their email, right? So you want to get them to register for the street fair. So it could be a $0 registration, but you have to register because then you get their email, which is a really important part of building your donor base. However, there are people that would probably donate or pay for a ticket. So you can give a couple different ticketing options there. So you could think about giving a $10 option, or sponsor a student to go, or whatever that is for your cause. And then again, you take those people that did spend money when they didn't have to, and you star those. And those are the ones that really care about your cause and have the financial means to keep supporting you. So for a street fair idea, that would be one of the ways that you can do this upselling, just through the ticketing. Again, with I mentioned on the golf tournament side, just some items, and then also the auction bidding, donate your bidding is a great one. The packages are also really key there. Those are the three that I would highly recommend starting with. Those are the ones we've been testing and developing with our customers, and they're loving them. Really getting that 20% increase right off the bat, and then identifying those superstar donors. And then I see another one. If you use an example like $25 for 75 meals, would it restrict the funds? Again, I'm not a charity lawyer, so please take this with a grain of salt. But when you're talking about communicating impact, I would think about how much does it cost you to holistically to create that impact, right? So for this charity, it's not $25 just to buy the food for 75 meals. It's $25 to source the food, to package the food, to pay the percentage of overhead it costs and everything like that. So it does cover a lot of things if you are more specific. So don't restrict yourself when you're making your own. Give yourself enough buffer when you're asking for $25 for the administration and the operations and everything involved. So it wouldn't be technically funds that you could use for anything. However, it does give you that breathing room. For sure. So a great question there, but again, you should be consulting someone with more legal expertise on that piece specifically, but that's what we've seen charities do. And then John Mark, I did see one for you as well. It says, I'm afraid of bombarding my donors with emails and creating donor fatigue. How do I ensure I don't do that?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent point, and that is something that people should be concerned about. And so the way to do this, and I was alluding to it earlier, think about the emails that you subscribe to, right? I've got some favorites that are out there. Obviously, this is Nonprofits Tech for Good, so I would hope and assume that everyone is big fans of everything that Heather and her team have put together. They're creating so much valuable content that you would be crazy to unsubscribe from that, right? You're not going to unsubscribe from someone that is going to continually add value to your life. I think another great example is James Clear. If anyone's ever read Atomic Habits, he has a fabulous newsletter. Comes out once a week, and I keep all of them and I reference them. I think they're fantastic. And so people do not unsubscribe from valuable things. And so what does that mean? It means you need to provide value. And so that's what it boils down to. That can be challenging, that can be nerve-wracking, that can just be tiresome and cumbersome. However, the upside is tremendous. The upside of having a really engaged newsletter, a really engaged email database, is that when it is time to raise money, you have a very large list of engaged donors that care about the cause. And so that's where things go back to the 80-20 principle. And so I'll use an example of a client that's a maternal health program that they have in Haiti, and they've got different parts of the Middle East and sub-Saharan Africa. They provide healthcare, nutrition, education for women and children around the world. They've got thousands of people that they work with, women and children they work with on a daily basis. They do incredible work. No one unsubscribes from fantastic stories of women going through receiving life-giving care that their donors have made possible. No one unsubscribes from thank you so much for making this birthing facility a possibility by giving us $50,000. You are changing generations. You are doing all this great work. Without you, this would not exist. This maternal health program would not exist without you, specific donor, being thanked. No one unsubscribes from that. And so that's what's so important. When we talk about the impact that we are creating with our programs and interventions, that's when we get to transmit these stories of transformation right back to the people that made it possible, right? That's why we tell donors what we are doing with the money that they gave us. That is how you increase engagement. And you might be saying, oh, we don't have enough stories from the field. This is a problem that we see as a company, Social Impact Solutions, all the time. And that's what we help them really fix. But you've got to tell donors the great work that they are doing through your organization. Shine the spotlight on them, being the donors, saying, you made this a possibility. I can assure you, donor fatigue is not an issue when all you're doing 80% of the time is thanking them for the good work that they are doing. That's really just the easiest hack. Tell stories of transformation. It makes the biggest difference.
Awesome. Love that. And then one more here. It was about the ideal donor profile. I think you mentioned that earlier, and it says, will they miss out on raising more for their cause if you start, canceling people out? I think, yeah.
Got it. So if you're only focusing on acquiring a certain ideal donor, are we going to miss out on others? So this is a common issue, and this is the whole idea of niching down. It's more commonly talked about in the for-profit space than the nonprofit space. But let's actually just use Charity Water as an example. The gentleman that started Charity Water was a nightclub promoter. That's where his experience came from. So he was really good at promoting, to that certain demographic, right? He was really good at promoting with, let's just say career-aged individuals that love to party, right? Let's just put it in that category. And so his ideal donor profile was that demographic. If he had just gone and said a huge pivot, I know I'm really good at attracting and converting these kinds of donors, but man, orthopedic surgeons in Dallas-Fort Worth have tons of money. We need to go focus on them. And he's right. Orthopedic surgeons do have lots of access to cash and capital, but his specific niche, like the skill set of Charity Water, was career-aged professionals that love to party. And so I'm using that sort of a facetious term, but it's true. And they've raised over $750 million using that model. It works when you focus on your niche and you really, really go after perfecting the approach to attracting and converting donors. It's like when people say, man, if we only had government grants, that would change everything for us, because they see these huge checks that are written, by government institutions. It's not always the case. Some organizations are excellent at writing grants, receiving grants, and executing grants. It's a lot of work, as anyone on this call knows. I mean, it's extraordinarily challenging. But if your sweet spot is, career-age professionals that love to party, orthopedic surgeons in Dallas-Fort Worth, or government granting organizations, go do that. It's really, really hard to grow an organization, specifically if you're under $50 million a year in revenue, that is trying to focus on too many different funders specifically. So Who's your ideal donors? Triple down on them. Don't get shiny object syndrome or going after what's there. So I just really would suggest niching down. Justin, I'm actually seeing a couple pop in for you here. Let's see. This is actually, I love this one for you. This is great. How do you determine the right ticket price and donation levels using Trellis?
That's a great question. So if it's a new event, it's definitely trickier. New events, you really then have to think about, if you have an ideal donor profile, what are they usually spending? And think about maybe looking at the market in terms of what people are usually doing. So if it's we just had a lawn bowling tournament, right? There's not many lawn bowling tournaments. What do you charge for a lawn bowling tournament? And it's, it's again, who is your ideal donor? So in this case, for the lawn bowling tournament, their ideal donor was actually companies. They're going after companies, and companies have a little bit more money, and they saw it and they wanted to make it more of an employee, engagement piece. So it was actually sponsorship tickets, and so they could spend $1,000 per ticket and only try and get 10, right? So that's how big lawn bowling was. If you're looking for more of the community side, individuals, then you're looking at a different type of ticket altogether, right? And that is, so for the same event, let's say as lawn bowling, just for the community, you're looking at your donor and saying, okay, well, we've done an event in the past and they're definitely okay paying $150 for a golf tournament, or maybe 200. So a lawn bowling is shorter. Let's get them at 50. But you have to think about that whole package, right? So if it's $50 to come in, but then nothing else is included and you're adding things on top that they can enjoy, then that's where you can get additional revenue. Or again, you go for that package and you say, hey, the ultimate lawn bowling package, where you get, your one raffle ticket, you get a bowling for the prize, and you get your admission and a hot dog and a drink, right? It's $100, and you can see how that goes. For the additional donation, I would highly recommend thinking again about, if it's high volume is what you're going for, low donation amount, because really the goal isn't the money you're making, it's identifying. So for the fair, someone asked about a fair, and what I would highly recommend with the fair, if you want as many people as possible, you could even make it free and then ask them for a donation, right? And so you want, maybe even it's a $2 donation or a $5 donation. I truly think, $5 is the lowest you want to go. If someone's using their credit card and they're going through the ordeal, it's not that hard, but you do have to type in your information. $5 is probably lowest. I've seen 5, 10, and then 25. And you can think about, if you want to talk about impact at $25, maybe the impact, really ratchets up at 25. So then you can pull people towards that. So think about the event and the experience from the donor point of view, but then also think about what the goal is. Is the goal to just get contacts and identify if they're a superstar donor, or is the goal to make a lot of money on that event only? I would go for the former versus the latter, but that's hopefully that helps answer that question.
No, that's super solid. And there's another good one. This is relevant for auctions, and obviously with COVID, being the case that it is right now, things have changed. We can have a lot more in-person events. What types of items have you seen be especially successful in auctions?
Yeah, so what I like to talk about with auction items isn't just about success in terms of donors love them, but success in organizations love them too, because I bet you a lot of people on this call get a little tired of trying to collect auction items. So what other things can you auction off? And what we saw a customer do recently actually is auction off the naming of a street. Something totally different, right? Someone also did coffee with a well-known community member, right? Coffee with the mayor. We've had coffee with, we're up in Canada, so with a hockey player, right? So if you have someone who's willing to maybe give their time and not money, right? Then you can do that, or a certain experience that they can provide that isn't a physical product. It doesn't actually cost the person a lot, but other people see a lot of value in it. So just thinking outside of the box there. Of course, also there is a great one if you're doing a live auction, especially, or a silent. It's called the mystery item, or whatever that is to you. Some people have just a pie, but it's this like golden pie, and it gets auctioned off for almost the most amount of money because it just sets the tone and saying, hey, we're trying to raise money here. This is the first item, and we're gonna build it up and get a lot of money, even though it's only a pie and someone bid $1,000 for it. right? Or a mystery item and they bid it. And it's not usually not high value, but it just kind of sets the tone for the rest of the auction. And if you make that your first item in the silent auction, it shows, okay, I'm reminded. So those are some ideas. I mean, obviously the wine packages are good. Golf courses are always willing to, if you can give them a call, and they're always going to pick up the phone, right, and ask for and build those relationships. It's pretty easy to get those foursomes and more traditional ones. It's a lot easier than you think. You just have to set aside a little bit of time to call.
Yeah, I think you're making a great point on that, because there's 1,000 ways to skin this. I mean, there's so many different approaches. And Vanessa had a question saying, how do we find donors and people who want to join our donor list? Justin just listed off, 5 or 6 different ways that you can do that, whether it's through an in-person event, whether it's through an online fundraiser, whether it's through an auction, there's so many different things that we can do. We just need to think about it a little bit differently. So Justin's technology is really great for donor, upselling. You're registering for an auction, boom, you just got a 30% increase in revenue, in overall revenue that costs very, very little, essentially nothing, in order to do that. And just by default, you grew your donor list by however many hundred, or in the case of the firefighting organization, 1,000 engaged donors. You grew the overall list by 10,000, and then people that actually donated on top of that, 1,000. And so it's a huge, huge way to get a massive bump in your list. And again, if there's any secret in marketing, it is growing your email list. And so other things that you can do, Vanessa, there's a million. I mean, when it comes to marketing, we can talk about search engine optimization. We can talk about in-person fundraisers, online fundraisers, referrals. We have and always will be the #1 lead source for anybody, whether you're a business, whether you're a nonprofit, whatever you are, referrals. And so that's one of the most neglected things that we see when it comes to how many people, how many board members refer donors to the organization on an annual basis. There are some boards literally where they have bylaws. You are expected to either pony up and give us $100,000 a year, or refer 5 to 10 people a year that could do the same thing. And so just think about it. The idea is we're trying to advance a cause. And all of this talk about marketing and fundraising is just to provide fuel to the fire, fuel for your engine to advance the cause faster. That's the whole idea here, to be able to fuel it further and do it faster using marketing techniques like storytelling, nurturing, and technology like with Trellis. We have a couple of other questions that just popped in. Let's see. Are there companies that offer raffle items for purchase? Justin, I think you're better suited for that.
Yeah, there is. So we can, there's Travel Pledge would be one to go to. They have a whole, especially if you're in the United States. So Travel Pledge, if you Google that, we're actually working on them with an integration to put it right into our system as well. So you could just select it from our system. But until then, you go to them, they can give you the item at a very discounted rate, and then you can raffle it from there. So Travel Pledge, P-L-E-D-G.
And I was at an event 2 weeks ago where it was a similar concept. But literally, they were auctioning off. Where were they going? They were going to Kruger National Park in South Africa. So everyone's auction, they're competing for this incredible week-long vacation in Kruger National Park, and X% of the profits went straight to the nonprofits, and as well as the other details that came in there. So there's lots of different things that can be done. It really is, your creativity is the only limitation on it.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Well, that wraps up the webinar for today. Justin, you want to say anything else before we close out?
No, I just want to thank everyone for the great questions. I love when we see a lot of questions. That means hopefully everyone was engaged. And if you want to learn more about Trellis, please just head over to Trellis.org and definitely try and fill out this quiz here to get started and see where you're at, because it shouldn't take a lot to really get a huge increase in your donor retention and the first step to increasing that long-term donor list you have. So thanks again for listening, and thanks for your time. Have a great rest of your day. And John Mark, did you want to close it off?
Yes, thank you guys so much for this. It's been a fantastic time to get to know you. Please do not hesitate to reach out to either one of us regarding questions. Justin is with Trellis, Trellis.org. I'm with Social Impact Solutions, socialimpactsolutions.com. But if you fill out the fundraising quiz, we'll have opportunities to follow up via email or on Zoom. The same thing with Justin, moving forward on that front. So please don't hesitate to reach out. We are here to be a resource to you. And thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Just real quickly, thank you, John. Thank you, Justin. Really great presentation. I always appreciate PowerPoints that have practical takeaways. All right. So I just wanted to let everyone know the webinar is being recorded. If you don't receive the email, just drop me an email and I'll forward it to you on Friday morning. All right. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.